After making your first earring, creating an opposite or a mirror can feel like a bit of a challenge. Here are a couple of tips. Begin making your second earring exactly the same way you began the first one. Start with a lollipop. Using shaping stitches and a two-sided join. One way to make a mirror is to begin to reverse the instructions at this point, making your asymmetrical split so that your 6-strand stack goes to the left and your 4-strand stack goes to the right. You would then pick up the 6mm bead that's meant to be on the left-hand side and wrapped by the 6-strand stack. You may find these instructions easier, however. After completing the lollipop, continue to follow the instructions exactly as they are written, wrapping the 6mm bead on the right-hand side of the join with a 6-strand stack. Begin to end the stack. If ending a stack is wrap, tack, whip, and snip, begin the wrap portion of that process using shaping stitches. Before continuing on to the tacking stitches, however, take a moment and assess your work. If you pull the working stack behind the work, this earring is going to look exactly like the first one. If you place it on top of the work, however, you will be able to make a mirror. Flip this over and you can see that this is the opposite of the beginning of the first earring. Complete the ending of the stack using the tacking stitches, the whip stitches, and snipping off the unused portions of the working stack. You can see that we now clearly have an opposite of the beginning of the first earring. From here, it's very easy to continue with the instructions and simply extrapolate to create the ladder around the opposite side of the earring. Before applying the backing, be sure that you are applying the glued portion of the component to the correct side of the ultrasuede, which is actually referred to as the wrong side. This side is the fuzzy side. The wrong side, which is what we want our glue to go to, is flatter. It's not as pretty. Apply a small dollop of glue, no more than half of a dime, to a dense portion of the back of the component, and then use your finger to dab the glue along the outside edges of the work. Don't allow it to get on the vertical edges of the work, the sides of the braid that can be seen when the work is finished, but do make sure that the glue gets all the way to the outer edge of the back. When you're done, The glue should look essentially like light mayonnaise on a sandwich. Try not to push the glue through the spaces in the ladder. Lay the component down on the ultrasuede and leave it alone. You'll be tempted to pick at it, but don't. Leave it 20 minutes. After the glue is dry, trim away the ultrasuede from the component. Be careful not to over-trim your work, meaning don't trim the ultrasuede so close that it disappears behind the component. Do make sure that you trim behind the jump ring. A thin margin of ultrasuede should be visible all the way around the work after you have completed trimming. To begin edge beading using brick stitch, first we must bury our knot. So prepare a thread and then sew through one of the larger beads in the ladder so that when you pull the thread through, the knot is buried inside the bead and won't show. Sew through the work so that the thread does not show and so that the thread is exiting the top of the stack at the rib very close to the split. Pick up 2 size 11 beads, one of each color in your kit. Sew through the rib of the soutache so that the thread is exiting the ultrasuede on the back. Sew through the right hand hole of the right hand bead. Pick up another size 11 seed bead, the same color as the second one in the pattern you've started to create. Sew through the rib, come out the ultrasuede, and sew through the right hand hole of the right hand bead. A good way to think about this technique is to realize that you're going through every bead twice, but you are only going into the soutache stack once, and you're only going through the ultrasuede once. When sewing back through the bead for the second time, think about having the needle point toward the row of beads that's already established. If the needle is pointing to the right out into open space, you have sewn through the wrong hole, and the beads will not stand up to create the brick stitch pattern that we're aiming for. Continue working around the component, 2 beads of one color, 2 beads of another color, 2 beads of one color, 2 beads of another color. Remember that you started with 2 beads on your needle, but after that you work 1 bead at a time. Take a look at the back of your work. Because we only sew through the ultrasuede one time and then pull the thread back over, we create this nice row of blanket stitches on the back. Eventually you will reach a plane change where the soutache seems to lie in 2 different layers. The best technique for moving from one plane to another is to continue the brick stitch pattern, but sew only through the ultrasuede for 1 bead. After you've applied that bead, you've now moved on to the other plane and continue the pattern through the soutache and the ultrasuede. When you reach the jump ring, you'll want to keep your beads in front of the jump ring. Do this by sewing through the soutache and out the ultrasuede, but then bring your needle back through the jump ring and through the bead. You may need to do this for a space of 2 or 3 beads until you pass by the jump ring. As you begin to complete the edge beading, assess how much space you have left. You may not have enough space to continue the pattern of 2 beads of one color, 2 beads of another. It's better to skip a bead in the pattern than it is to try to crowd one more in. After you sew through the last bead for the second time, sew through the first bead, through the bead, into the soutache, and out the ultra suede, and then back through the bead one more time. This bead effectively has 3 passes of thread through it. Sew through the second bead, the soutache, the ultra suede, and then to end your thread, simply slide your needle along underneath the blanket stitches that you created with the edge beading. You do not need to create a knot. Simply snip your thread off. Finishing your earring includes the optional swag and the earring finding. To add the swag, bury the knot inside one of the larger beads and allow your thread to exit your edge beading at the desired location. Begin stringing on a pattern of beads. You can make this pattern up or you can follow the one in the booklet. After you have what you believe to be enough beads on the string, test fit the swag underneath the earring. You want the crystal at the bottom to hang at the center, and because the earring is asymmetrical, you may need to add or subtract a few beads at the end of your swag. Sew through the edge beading and the stack at the desired location, and then reverse your needle and sew back through the stack and the edge beading and all the way back through the swag one time. You should have 2 passes of thread all the way through the swag for stability. After you've gone through the swag twice, sew in and out of a couple of the edge beads just to give it support, and then end your thread by sewing underneath the blanket stitches and snip your thread. Use pliers to gently open the loop at the end of the earring finding. Insert the ball through the jump ring, and then use the pliers to close the loop. That completes the earring. I hope you enjoyed making arabesque earrings for Anu and are excited about moving forward to create the blossom pendant for Anu.